Good lord, woman, at what point do you just go naked? I'm Mac, and I've got your back. Today we're reviewing Beyond Citadel. Beyond Citadel is a sequel to The Citadel, which, full transparency, never played. Regardless, it's a 2.5D first-person shooter, utilizing 2D sprites within 3D levels, as well as featuring a retro anime aesthetic. In it, these deity-like life forms called the Trumpeters of the Apocalypse have annihilated most of humanity. Of the 10 billion that once resided on Earth, less than 200,000 now remain, and most of those are brainwashed soldiers under the Trumpeters. But then you have these angels who want to help what's left of humanity overthrow the Trumpeters. You play as a character known only as the Martyr, who with the help of her allies goes against the army of the Trumpeters of the Apocalypse to destroy them once and for all. The Martyr herself has her own reasons for fighting, however. Her younger brother was taken from her, and by overthrowing the angels, she hopes to reunite with him, because I'm pretty sure she is in love with him. Incest is wincest, I suppose. That is a very basic overview of the story. One that, admittedly, doesn't really scratch the surface of it. There is, apparently, a lot going on here. To give you an idea of how crazy it is, God's involved. Like, God. The Almighty. The plot and lore are given through indirect means, by character dialogue or loading screen tips, so it's on the player to piece everything together, which definitely makes it a little more intriguing. You've even got hidden pieces of artwork you can find in the game's maps to really visualize the story. And visualize it certainly does. There is somewhat of a hurdle, though. I'm pretty sure the game is translated from a different language. The text and writing reads very stiff and unnaturally. There's a few typos here and there. It's not a deal breaker. You can definitely manage, but it is worth noting. Of course, if you don't want to bother looking too deeply into the story, you're definitely able to forego it and get right into the sweet, sweet action. Speaking of, Beyond Citadel is a pretty simple game objective-wise. Shoot people, make it to the end of a level, done. You might need to get some keys or collect batteries to open a door, but your main goal is making it to the end of the level. Maneuverability is the name of the game, as the Martyr moves very fast and eventually gains the ability to double jump, climb ledges, and dash in midair. No two level feels truly alike, as they consistently change up sights and layouts. You have close quarter levels, urban-themed stages that encourage a slightly more methodical approach as you utilize cover and pick off enemies one by one. Then there's wider and more open maps that really make use of the game's extensive movement options, allowing you to skitter around the map at dizzying speeds. And there's plenty that host verticality, offering high vantage points for you and your enemies. You might even find a jump pad, which lets you fly around near unimpeded. You've even got these maps where you've got to take command of these tanks and mechs with their rapid-firing machine guns and rockets. You've got this one train level, and I really like trains. Each stage even has its own music, and even though most of the game's OST seems to be licensed from other sources, it still sounds great. The action-oriented tracks are good, but we especially enjoyed the more surreal and ominous tunes that really fit in with the game's vibe. There are some original tracks though, and those sound pretty good as well. The enemies are as varied as the maps. You have standard troopers to blast away at, snipers, bazookas, these commandos that can go invisible. You have these heavy machine gun emplacements that can lock down hallways and tear you to shreds if you're not careful. Artillery that can send barrages from long distances. There's these priests that use magic, these demon things, some tanks. There's a lot of enemy types, right? Each of them with their own attacks and ways to defeat them, making for a fun, assorted challenge. Now, even though your main goal is to make it to the end of the level, it would be unwise to just Zerg rush the level's end and get it over with. The enemies get progressively more difficult to combat the further you get in the game. To contend with this, it's worth finding the hidden obelisks the player can activate to level up their virtues, essentially the player's stats. You can level up your health, speed, recoil management, inventory space, and some other stuff as well. In some nooks and crannies, you can also find extra lives and merchants you can barter with for more supplies. From the standpoint of game designing, it's a pretty good way to get players to explore their surroundings more thoroughly. The guns are where the game really gets interesting though. Your arsenal will not be left wanting with the impressive variety of guns on offer. Automatic pistols, revolvers, assault rifles, light machine guns, submachine guns, pump action and semi-auto shotguns, and some high-powered rifles for some long-range action. You know, there's this rocket launcher you can use to fire a volley of rockets just wipe them clean off the face of the earth. No two gun feels truly alike, each having their own features and best way to handle. Each weapon feels distinct, and it's worth trying out each one to see which one you like the best. Some might prefer the long range and high power of the cavalry carbine, but others might like the light machine gun for some sustained fire. Some might like the semi-automatic shockhammer shotgun to really dump those shells into the enemy, but there's definitely merit to the pump-action shotgun, which has higher damage output in exchange for its slower fire rate. You've even got yourself a breech loader, which isn't very effective, but this is the gun that won at Rourke's Drift. Are you really gonna talk smack about that? Weapons can even be upgraded. You can increase the magazine size, put on optics and grenade launchers. There is also a durability mechanic. If weapons get below a certain threshold, they start to jam, which you have to clear manually. This can really screw you over in a firefight, so it's worth repairing or replacing your guns to keep them in good quality. If you don't, they might just blow up in your face, rendering them completely inoperable. The most interesting thing about the guns are the reload mechanics. The game gives you a few options, but it's only worth going for the one the game clearly wants you to use. Unload, load, and cock. Unlike most games where you press a button and the game does the rest, here you sort of have to take an active role in reloading your weapons. When using a magazine-fed gun, you have to press X to remove your magazine, press R to put a new one in, and if needed, right mouse button will cock the bolt, putting a round in your chamber. You can do a speed reload, which indeed makes for a slightly faster reload, but it drops the magazine to the floor. The player can recover it, but there's also a chance that said magazine gets destroyed. Since magazines are a finite resource, this should only be done when absolutely necessary. Other guns require you to load in your bullets individually. Every time you press R is one round loaded in, so you basically have to mash the key as fast as you can. Weapons that require you to cycle around into the chamber, like the pump-action shotgun or the bolt-action whale gun, don't do so automatically. You have to right-click to chamber the round. Overall, I like the system. You can get used to it pretty quick, and even though it's a pretty simple mechanic, it definitely does add some immersion. It's certainly a lot more interesting than just pressing a button and letting your character do the rest. And on a note about the guns, can I just say, we here at Jetavision are really loving the first-person sprites. They look great, they're animated well, what more can I say? Regarding difficulty, the game is challenging, but honestly pretty forgiving. We played on the hardest difficulty, but only died a few times, mainly because health is so easily accessible, with health pickups aplenty around the map. You can also build up a really sizable pool of extra lives if you level up the right stats. And of course, we gotta talk about the gore because boy does this game have it. And I'm not just talking about the type of gore where enemies comically explode into a mound of flesh and blood either. We're talking arms getting blown off, exposed rib cages, freaking stomachs being ripped open, and they're trying to keep their intestines from spilling out. You'll hear their last breaths, and then they'll pull out their sidearm in a last-ditch effort to get a few more rounds off. You can shoot at different parts of an enemy, and an injury will actually appear in that spot. Even the main character isn't immune to the game's grotesque nature, because when you die, you get absolutely obliterated. I mean, look at this. She reminds me of that rabbit from Five Nights at Freddy's. We did like the shock value it brought, but obviously that fades out pretty quick. Even still, it's just cool. Not only can you respect the effort, but it genuinely does make gameplay quite satisfying just seeing all this damage you're doing. The fact that you can actually see the disfigurement you're causing in detail makes it feel more gruesome, and honestly elicits a stronger emotional response than if they just comedically exploded into a fountain of blood. It really makes you feel that the guns you're using are powerful. They have impact. Not a ludicrous amount of impact, but the right amount to give it a disturbingly realistic feel. Now, talking about the gore, there's apparently a little bit of controversy with it. It has more to do with the first game. I guess some people came to interpret the gore in combination with the anime art style to mean that there's some sort of fetishism going on. Guro, I think it's called. Now, far be it from us to give an opinion here, but we're going to anyways. I don't know, can an art style be inherently sexual? If we're just gonna assume that it is, surely that means that, I don't know, Attack on Titan is a giantess enthusiast's hard vor fetish. I feel like it would have to be presented in an overtly sexual way, which admittedly is kind of done with the main character, but this one example isn't really enough to put a label on the entire game. That was a really weird detour. Now, despite all the things we've raved about so far, our favorite thing is just kind of the mood. The post-apocalyptic world is bleak, you can't really get attached to any of the characters, which gives it a very lonely feeling. The early 3D graphics graphics and ominous music. Kind of brings a surreal vibe. It's kind of depressing, but, you know, in a good way. Beyond Citadel was, overall, pretty killer. Compelling story, classic graphics, great art, acrobatic maneuverability, a pleasant variety in levels, enemies, and guns to keep things fun and fresh, fantastic weapons handling, and a brutal gore system makes for quite a good time. Jedivision's score for Beyond Citadel is an 8.5 out of 10. As far as recommendations go, honestly, I'd highly recommend it. Even if you're the type of person who gets weirded out by the imagery the game presents, there's no denying that it's just a fun and solid game. And at 15 bucks, it's priced quite fairly and affordably. There is a very strong case to make Beyond Citadel your next game. But that is Jedivision's review on it. Now, if you're new here, welcome. If you're not, welcome back. You've just watched a review from the Jedivision. If you like what you see and want to keep up to date with our latest game and movie reviews, subscribe to the channel, follow the Twitter, and join the Discord. Mac Cheese the Jedivision, signing out. You all have a good one.